There's no question that Wagner militia, the Russian government, would love to try and track down UK special forces, and by signalling that they are in Ukraine, they would become a high value target by the Russians.
More details have emerged this morning about the person who leaked more than 100 highly classified US military documents online. Meanwhile, MPs here in Westminster are warning that British lives could be at risk due to the breach. George Grylls is the Times defence correspondent, and he has the latest. Morning, George.
Morning, Patrick.
So what do we know about this leaker?
Well, it's an improbable manhunt that has been launched internationally to try and find out how these incredibly sensitive classified documents, I mean, it's very hard to underscore just how, classified these documents are.
Are we talking sort of Julian Assange, WikiLeaks level, that sort of sensitivity?
Yeah, I would argue so. I mean, particularly given that, this is an active conflict taking place between Russia and Ukraine. This is influencing how that war is playing out because some of this information relates to such sensitive details as, for example, how many air defense missiles Ukraine has left. It's worth stressing that the MOD has said that a lot of this information is made up, that there's a mixture of truth and fiction in there. The US hasn't, formally sort of authenticated them, but nevertheless, the White House and the Pentagon are scrambling to identify the leaker.
Who do they think it is? I mean, have they got that far? Where did they leak the documents?
Well, the US government hasn't formally identified anyone, but there is starting to be a sort of trail that goes back through a number of social media sites, including 4chan, Telegram, Twitter. But eventually it goes back to this site called Discord. Now, Discord is a social media platform which is mainly used by gamers to sort of discuss playing online video games. And it seems that one of the first leaks came on a server on Discord run by a British Filipino university student who's 20 years old called Wagner. That is the one that is publicly sort of, you can identify it definitely as that point. But now it emerges it might have been leaked even before that, and that there was possibly another Discord server since deleted. And it was on this one now that the attention is focusing, following this investigation by the Washington Post, on this a potential leaker from who worked on a US military base.
Your story on the front page of this morning's Times reveals that MPs here are very concerned that British lives could be put at risk by this leak. What are their concerns?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm going to caveat before I say it that the MOD stresses that a lot of this they believe is made up and it's not accurate. But basically, there are two main pieces from the leak so far that concern the UK. The first is this incident with a British spy plane flying over the Black Sea that according to the leaks, a Russian plane might have tried to shoot it down, which is much more serious than it was originally made out. And secondly, perhaps more dangerously, there's a list of the number of special forces operatives in Ukraine, and it shows that of the 97 deployed by NATO countries, 50 are from the UK. Again, I'm going to stress once again, none of this is authenticated or anything. But, MPs are concerned that if it is accurate, revealing the status of British Special Forces operatives in a country that is at war is putting their lives at risk.
And what's the latest from the investigation, the national security investigation in the US?
I think there's a game being played between the media and the White House. The Pentagon are trying to sort of downplay everything and say, we're going to turn over every rock, I think was the phrase that Lloyd Austin, the US Defense Secretary, used yesterday. But meanwhile, there's a race between these American publications to sort of find the leaker and trace back through these weird online forums where documents were being shared in between memes and other sort of heavily ironized jokes that sort of relate to the number of air defense missiles that Ukraine has.
Well, George Grylls, Times defence correspondent, thanks for joining us to talk through that fascinating story, fascinating and foreboding story about the person who leaked more than 100 highly classified US military documents online and the hunt to identify them. Alicia Kearns is Conservative Chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee and joins us now. Good afternoon, Alicia.
Afternoon.
Should the UK be worried about the potential impact of these leaks? That's the headline on the front page of this morning's Times.
So I don't think this fundamentally changes our position, our effort, or our commitment to Ukraine. But of course, if these are proven to be a serious and genuine leak, then this will be worrying because what it does is it does put at risk US, allied, and UK assets around the world, particularly those working to save Ukrainian lives.
One of the main revelations is the suggestion that British special forces are in Ukraine. Obviously, you're limited as to what you can say about such a sensitive national security issue. But why would that exposure be such a serious issue for the safety of British personnel?
So look, the Ministry of Defence has been very clear that not everything within these documents is accurate. So we don't know. We know the government never comments on where we have special forces deployed. But the reason it would be a risk is there's no question that Wagner militia, the Russian government, would love to try and track down UK special forces. And by signalling that they are in Ukraine, they would become a high-value target by the Russians. And if there are British special forces there, we obviously do not want them to be targeted. And they will be working to try and end the conflict and save lives. So it is genuinely putting those on the ground at risk if there are any, but also it is putting at risk, if these are accurate, the extensive access that there clearly is within the Russian defence system.
Also, embarrassing for the US. Shows how much information it's gathering on its allies as well as its adversaries, no?
Well, I don't think there's that much new in this. I mean, the Snowden files a few years ago showed that I wouldn't say we spy on our allies, we listen. The reality is that allies listen to each other. Allies have to analyse one another. One piece of analysis in the document is that both the US and China think that if Labour were to come to power, they'd be far weaker on the Indo-Pacific than the Conservative government is. That's the kind of analysis that every intelligence system has the duty of collecting and thinking about and talking about in order to assure their kind of priorities abroad. But of course, there will of course be hurt feelings and of course questions about this.
Alicia Kearns, Conservative Chairwoman of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Thanks very much for talking us through that report about US officials scrambling to get to the bottom of a leak of secret documents which have been published online. The Washington Post reporting today that the suspect behind the leak of more than 100 highly classified US documents is a gun enthusiast who worked on a military base and shared the documents in an online group started during the pandemic.